You know that feeling, right? You walk into a store, you see a product, and you just know it's premium. You can just feel that it's going to be expensive. Brands like Lululemon or Ralph Lauren, they've got this down to an art. But here's the thing, it's not just about some slick design. Oh no, let's really dig into this, because there's some fascinating psychology happening right under our noses.
So what's the secret? I mean, how do they get us to happily pay like 10 times more for something when, let's be honest, a cheaper version does pretty much the same job? That's the big question we're going to tackle today. And believe me, these companies have spent billions trying to crack the code on how our brains work.
And the answer they found, the code they cracked, well, it all comes down to a really deep understanding of human psychology. It turns out there are these timeless principles that brands use again and again to create that premium vibe. So today, we're going to break down the 3 most powerful ones.
All right, principle number 1, exclusivity. You know, there's just something kind of magical about having something that not everyone else can get their hands on, right? But what does exclusivity really mean when we're talking about branding? And here's the core of it. Exclusivity isn't actually about the thing you're buying. The product itself almost becomes secondary. What you're really buying into is the story, the narrative, the status that comes with it. The story is the product.
And this brings up a really crucial distinction. See, a lot of people mix up exclusivity with just plain old scarcity, but they're not the same thing. Scarcity is just, sorry, we're sold out. Exclusivity, on the other hand, that's about creating a unique story, a special angle that makes your product feel different and better than everything else out there.
Okay, let's look at a classic example to see what I mean. Picture this, it's 1929. The car market is just getting flooded with cheap, mass-produced cars from Ford and Chevy. Now, if you're a company like Packard, which makes these high-end cars, this is a massive problem. How on earth do you compete with that? Well, what they did was totally counterintuitive, but absolutely brilliant. Instead of trying to make their cars cheaper, they leaned in and went the other way. They created a campaign that targeted a discriminating clientele. They talked all about craftsmanship and prestige. See, they realized they weren't just selling a car, they were selling status, an exclusive club, in a market full of noise. Now let's jump forward in time for a more modern example, one that you might actually recognize from the show Mad Men. The brand was Lucky Strike cigarettes, and they had a problem. People were starting to get, well, pretty skeptical about tobacco. So in a market like that, how do you make your brand feel premium?
The line they came up with was, and I quote, "Everybody else's tobacco is poisonous, Lucky Strikes is toasted." I mean, come on! It's pure genius. With that one simple, subtle twist, they created this completely unique angle. They didn't even argue about the health stuff. They just pivoted. They highlighted one unique quality. It's toasted. And suddenly, Lucky Strike was the premium, sophisticated choice. That is exclusivity at its best.
Okay, so exclusivity is great for getting people's attention, but it's not enough on its own to build a real, loyal fan base. To lock people in for the long haul, brands have to tap into our second principle, identity. And this is where things get really personal.
Here's the big idea with identity. Premium brands know you're not just buying a product, you're buying a piece of who you are, or maybe who you want to be. The product is like a mirror. It's supposed to reflect your aspirations back at you. You're consciously sending a signal to the world about yourself.
Chanel is a perfect example of this. Back in the 1950s, their famous No. 5 perfume had a problem. Sure, it was a premium product, but the market was getting crowded with competitors. At the same time, women were changing. They were becoming more independent. Chanel needed their fragrance to represent this new, confident, sophisticated woman.
So what did they do? Something absolutely brilliant. They didn't talk about the scent or the flowers or any of that. Instead, they made a bold statement about identity with this slogan: "Every woman alive adores Chanel No. 5. See what they did there? It positioned the perfume as the symbol of elegance. It wasn't just a fragrance anymore. It was an aspiration. You wanted to be the kind of woman who wears Chanel No. 5. Okay, so we've got exclusivity, which creates that initial desire. Then we've got identity, which forges a personal connection. But the third principle, storytelling, this is the one that really cements a brand in your mind and creates a deep emotional bond. Think of storytelling as the glue that holds everything else together. It's all about creating a narrative that weaves the product right into a customer's life. It takes a simple transaction, buying something, and turns it into a real experience, one that's packed with emotion. You're not just buying a product anymore, you're becoming part of a story. And you really can't talk about storytelling without talking about an espresso. I mean, think about it. By the mid-2000s, coffee was everywhere. It was a total commodity. You could get an espresso machine pretty easily. So, how in the world do you convince people that your little coffee pod is a luxury item?
Well, they figured it out. They realized they weren't in the coffee business. They were in the lifestyle business. They were selling a story. And who better to be the face of that story than George Clooney? He wasn't just some random celebrity endorser. He was the living, breathing embodiment of that cool, sophisticated lifestyle. And that simple question, what else? It was perfect. It implied that Nespresso isn't just an option, it's the only option for someone with taste. So you see, these principles, exclusivity, identity, storytelling, they're totally timeless. I mean, the way they're delivered has changed, right? We've gone from old-school print ads to Instagram feeds, but the core psychology behind it all is exactly the same. So let's look at a couple of modern brands that are using this exact playbook right now.
Let's start with Lululemon. How do they do exclusivity? They created this idea of the sweat life. It's not just workout gear, it's a whole community, a club you get to be a part of. What about identity? Well, they're selling the identity of the mindful, ambitious, high performer. And for storytelling, they create these awesome mini documentaries. Then you have a brand like Represent Clothing. They nail exclusivity with their limited edition drops. And their whole story is built around the journey of their founder. It's all there.
So, okay, how can you actually put this into practice? It really comes down to a simple 3-step process. Step 1 is what we call psychology mapping. You've got to figure out what exclusivity and aspiration really mean for your customers. Step 2, define your marketing vector. This is basically setting the ground rules, the non-negotiables for how your brand looks, feels, and talks. And finally, step 3, optimize performance. But you're not just optimizing for sales, you're optimizing for brand equity. You're constantly asking, is our story actually connecting with people?
Because at the end of the day, all of this proves one thing. Building a premium brand isn't just about having a pretty logo or cool visuals. It's so much deeper than that. It's about creating an entire world, a universe that your customers look at and say, yeah, I want to be a part of that. So, if there's one thing you walk away with from all this, let it be these 3 takeaways. Exclusivity is what gets them to want it. Identity is what helps them see themselves in it. And storytelling, that's what makes them remember you long after they've bought the product. And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. Whether you're building a brand or just buying from one, what world are you creating for your customers? And more importantly, why should they care enough to want to be a part of it? Answer that, and you've got the secret to the whole thing.